Good morning, everyone who's here, and good whatever time it is for you, those of you who are joining online. This is the 31st webinar for the Network for Education and Research on Peace and Sustainability, or NERPS. NERPS is an international network of educators, researchers, and practitioners collaborating towards the advancement of peaceful and sustainable societies amidst global challenges. My name is Catherine Alfredo. I'm an assistant professor at the University of South Florida and a cross-appointed faculty member here at Hiroshima University through NERPS, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. So some housekeeping reminders. This webinar is being recorded and will be published or be posted on the website. If you're joining us remotely, please type your questions in the chat box and we will ask them on your behalf during the question and answer period. So we are very pleased today to have Dr. Prakash Bhattarai. He's currently acting as director of the Center for Social Change, nonprofit research and advocacy institute in Nepal, working on issues around education, governance, migration, labor, peace building, and civic engagement. Dr. Bhattarai holds a PhD in peace and conflict studies from the University of Otago in New Zealand. He also holds a master's degree in population studies and international peace studies. He's been visiting research scholar at the Department of Peace and Conflict in Sweden and at Peace Research Institute in Frankfurt, Germany. He's also a 2018 Asia Global Fellow at the Asia Global Institute at the University of Hong Kong. He has published articles in peer-reviewed journals such as International Negotiation, International Journal of Conflict Management, and Journal of Peace Building and Development. Dr. Bhattarai has more than 20 years of professional and leadership experience on issues surrounding governance, peace building, development, migration, labor, gender, and youth, with his association in a number of national and international organizations, as well as UN agencies. Welcome.
Good day. Thank you, Patrick, for my introduction, and thanks to NERPS for this opportunity to present my talks to this NERPS during the session. Sorry, I didn't have my PowerPoint presentation, and I have prepared some notes, and I tried my best to make our audience understand what I'm trying to convey. And so that the title of my talk is from the peace agreement to constitution making, Nepal journey to peace, justice, and strong institutions. So basically, the reason why I framed this, title or the talk is because, Nepal was gone through a decade-long civil war from 1996 till 2006, and that war ended in 2006 with the signing of a peace agreement between the Maoist rebels and the government of Nepal. And basically, the outcome of the peace agreement is always directed towards, ensuring durable peace. It also, aims to ensure justice for all, and also, build institutions that are capable to address the emerging, socio-political, ecological, and other needs of the society. So in that context, I just wanted to share how Nepal has actually, traveled, from the signing of peace agreement to writing a constitution. And building and how its institutions have performed over the years. So I think this will be kind of the framing, of my presentation. And in my presentation, so I first talked about the peace and the state of peace and how these institutions has contributed to, build peace, or whether or not the institutions have contributed to build peace in the country. The second one, I'm trying to focus on the aspect of justice and how that justice has, contributed, how does this institution has contributed to ensure justice. And the third one is the institution itself. And though, the institution have very, multiple roles to perform, but here I'm more focusing on like how these state institutions or these post-conflict institutions are able to address some of the emerging, needs of the country, such as the climate change or addressing the influx of migrations and many other aspects. So let me, start from the aspect of peace. When it comes to the peace, we can basically observe like four major trends, in the context of Nepal. The first one is, since the signing of the peace agreement till now, we can see the prevention of the large-scale violence, because one of the aim of each, peace agreement is to stop large-scale political violence, large-scale organized kind of violence. So we could see, that has been prevented, in the past, let's say 18 years. The second trend that we have observed is the no presence of organized armed groups or violent political forces. Though, right after the signing of peace agreement, we had quite a number of like more than 100 small armed groups active around the country. But because of the, the institutional efforts, because of the state efforts, at present, like there is no such presence of, of different organized armed groups and other violent political forces. Yet, the conflict and confrontation between different socio-political and cultural groups have been a continuous practice. Though large-scale political violence has been ended, there's no organized political, violent groups in the country, but the conflict and confrontation between different socio-political and cultural groups, especially claiming their rights, claiming their power, and also claiming their identity. That's kind of a conflict has been a kind of a continuous practice. And the fourth trend is that the structural violence in the name of gender, caste, and ethnicity are occurring frequently. So though we don't have an active political violence, we don't have these violent groups active in the country, but this kind of structural violence are still there, and that's still has kept the country in some sort of like violent environment. So those are the four major trends when it comes to the peace. And what does it says? What does it mean? That means that existing institutions have been successful in controlling large-scale violence, yet they're not fully successful in preventing or lowering the risks of structural as well as political violence. So that's one aspect we can talk about. The second one is like institutions as source of conflicts due to their inability to address people's concerns and grievances in timely and appropriate manners. Because why there is structural violence, why there are conflict and confrontations between different socio-political or cultural groups, is because the institutions that are set up to address those kind of violences are not functioning effectively, or they are not capable enough to to deal with that kind of problems, or the violence are deeply embedded, and the institution requires to have some other social interventions or cultural interventions, and the institutions are not able to do that. So institution in itself has been a kind of a source of conflicts. And the third aspect is like how to make the existing national, provincials, and local institutions accountable and stronger to respond to conflict and violence and eventually develop as a source of peace is a critical question for us to ponder. So, uh, so really, it's important to strengthen our institutions to make to make this structural violence, stop or prevent. So that's a kind of that's a kind of our need. And the second aspect, I'm going to talk about justice. So when it comes to justice, I want to talk about the three aspects of justice. The first one is the formal, justice mechanisms and how it is functioning. The second one is kind of, quasi-judicial justice system. Uh, and the third one is the transition justice system. Let me briefly talk about this formal justice system. So basically, even after the signing of peace agreement in 2006, a lot of debates was going on in terms of, let's say, the structural reform, and that also includes the reform of the justice sectors. But not much, has been changed in its structures. And as so, we are continuing the traditional justice structure. It's just like, so we have a three level of court, like the Supreme Court, High Court, and the District Court. And it is still centralized, structures, like, unitary kind of structures, and there is some kind of hierarchy in place. So not much has been changed or reformed in terms of the formal justice system. When it comes to this, quasi-judicial justice system, basically, the Constitution of Nepal, 2015, that has been, promulgated after the peace agreement, that has made a provision of judicial committee, the establishment of judicial committee in each local government. So we have in Nepal, like we have 753 local government bodies, and each local government bodies has, a judicial committee under the, chairpersonship of the vice, the vice chair of the, local government unit, and it has a role to make justice. The second, quasi-judicial justice system is the police. There are many communities in Nepal where, instead of going to the court or the local government, so they first visit police to, to have that justice. So the police is also quite active. And we also have another structure called district administration office. So it is a federal government, district-based structures, which does not have a clear mandate to, let's say, resolve disputes, but the district administration office has also kind of a traditional, practice of, resolving, disputes and providing justice. And all these justice, institutions are active, but, people are not so much happy about the overall, let's say, formal justice system and also the quasi-judicial justice system for three important reasons. The first one is, the delayed, justice making process. It takes a long time that people, even if they file their case or complaints, because of this bureaucratic process, because of the political interference, and because of many other factors, the justice making process has not been as smooth, as fast as the people have expected. So that's been one of the hindering factors in Nepalese justice system. The second one is the corruptions. So justice institutions are also, blamed for the massive corruption, so that people who are really the victims, or those who are really seeking justice, are not actually getting justice from the justice system. And the third one is the accessibility, that people do not have, not everyone has, can access that justice system. Sometimes it's expensive, sometimes because of this power dynamics they cannot approach, sometimes of this, the geographical factors, prevent prevent people to, to reach to those institutions. So that's been, one of the very challenge. And I also want to talk about the transitional justice system because, in many post-conflict society, to deal with the past or to deal with the human rights violations or the crime against humanity, committed during a time of war, there is a provisions of, establishing some kind of like transitional justice mechanism. Basically, some of the conflict affected countries, they have established these tribunals, others have established, truth and reconciliation commissions. And that kind of commissions, will receive the complaints from the victims and, try to address those through these transitional justice mechanisms. In the case of Nepal, though it was an important provisions of the Comprehensive Peace Accord 2006, but only 2014 the Truth and Reconciliation Commission Act was actually adopted, by the Parliament, and the two commissions, the Truth and Reconciliation Commissions and the commissions on the investigation of enforced disappeared person, CIDP in brief, were formed in February 2015. And the commissions were mainly mandated to investigating the cases of serious human rights violations and crime against humanity that took place during the time of armed conflict. It was also mandated to recommend the legal actions against those responsible for serious crimes and, fostering climate of lasting peace and reconciliations and offering suggestions for victim compensations. However, the function of these, commissions could not go smoothly for a long time due to controversy around their limited jurisdictions to investigate and provide recommendations on the grave human rights violation cases, mainly related to killings, sexual violence, and tortures. And despite the law itself was also put on the question mark, and many human rights groups or even the victims group claim that it's not meeting the international standards, so that it has to be amended. And the commissions that were formed after the adaptation of this TRC Act were also very much politically influenced, so they couldn't make some independent decisions in terms of investigating the cases from the time of the conflict. But despite all these limitations, both commissions, the Truth and Reconciliation Commissions and the commissions on the investigations of enforced disappeared persons, they were able to receive approximately 63,000 complaints. That includes allegations related to torture, rape, and murder by security personnel and the Maoist rebels. Likewise, the disappearance commissions received like more than 3,200 cases pertaining to disappearances. Both commissions were able to conduct consultation meetings in almost all districts, through which they increased awareness among the victims and general public to file the complaints at the TRC and CIEDP. So, what was like, despite all these works they have done, what was really missing is to create a respectable and genuine, like, transitional justice system to investigate and take further, action against those responsible for serious crimes. And there was also a need for legal clarity around, whether the conflict crimes should be dealt under the regular legal system or should wait until the tribunal get functional by meeting the international standard. So, so that was kind of, the things. And my conclusion is like, whether, this kind of justice institutions, like access to justice, along with ensuring timely justice to all can be considered as an indicator for sustainable peace. Whether the existing justice-making institutions could be formal, quasi-formal, or transitional, have capacity to ensure timely justice, to those in need and to those like waiting since long. I think that's a critical question. And how to make these justice institutions are trustworthy to the people, so people adhere to its, verdicts. So I think that's also something very important, things to take into consideration. And now my final, kind of part of my presentation is focused on the strong institutions, because it's really important to talk about the strong institutions, because they are very important, because um, this is also, peace, justice, and strong institutions is also one of the UN SDG goal, which is goal number 16. And also, peace, justice, and strong institutions are key to all societies, but, these are the most important element to post-conflict societies, to build trust and create hope for the betterment among people and communities who have just come out of several years of devastating conflict. And it's also, having peace, justice, and strong institutions are prerequisite for sustainable development and build a civilized, healthy, trustful and secure society. And it's also important to promote and enforce like non-discriminatory laws and policies for sustainable development. So when it comes to the strong institutions, Nepal drafted its new constitution in 2015 after after the signing of the peace agreement. It took like almost 9 years to sign to come up with a new constitution, and that that constitution has made a provisions of like 3 tier of government, like federal, provincial, and the local government. And each government, each government has some executive, and also legislative power, and that is one of the important progress that Nepal have made in terms of the devolution of power, because in the past it was performing as a unitary state, and now it's been a federal state. So in that way, like this 3 tier of government has that right to to form their own policies and laws that could be beneficial to the people in their in particular territory. And one of the important rights that each government has received, and in particular the local and the provincial government institutions have received, is the management of natural resources, management of its people. But my question is like, are they capable to do that? Are they capable to address the rights which they have received through the constitutions, or what are some of the hindering factors which they are not able to fully exercise their rights and to address some of the emerging needs that Nepalese society is facing? Likewise, when it comes to the role of institution in the context of sustainability, like the constitution has also has provisions of forming different constitutional commissions, and in particular this national natural resources and fiscal commission. And it is a constitutional body established with the objectives to ensure just and equitable distributions of natural and fiscal resources among federal, state, and the local government. and fair and equitable sharing of natural and fiscal resources among federal, state, and local government remains prerequisites for effective implementation of federal system. The Commission makes recommendations to the governments regarding revenue distributions, equalization grant, conditional grant, internal borrowing, and sharing of natural resources among the three tiers of the government. So what I'm trying to convey here is that so we have this three tier of government, like the federal, provincial, and the local government, and we have these different constitutional commissions, in particular, let's say these national natural resources and fiscal commissions, which is more responsible for the equitable distribution of the resources, among three tier of governments. And we also have other institutions like different ministries like Ministry of Forest and Environment, Ministry of Energy, Water Resources and Irrigation, Ministry of Agriculture, So all these, relevant ministries, departments that we can also observe like at the provincial and the local level. But are they really, are these, newly established institutions, are they really, being able to perform the duties, effectively? I think that's one of the critical questions. And the four critical questions that I want to bring here into discussion is that, like, how this institution can address the unequal distributions and exploitation of the natural resources. How these institutions can also address the influx of internal, cross-border, and international migration, in particular, the climate-induced labor migration. How this institution can facilitate to promote like green economy, eco-friendly development, and renewable energy, and how this institution can address the needs and concerns of vulnerable people and communities affected due to conflict, disaster, and the ecological crisis. So why I'm bringing this, these questions into discussion is that, we have, Nepal has some sort of like, unequal distributions and exploitation of the natural resources. So even if it is, let's say, a resource-rich, country, and it has its, unique like ecological system. It has, diverse diversity, topography and climate conditions, upon which like, billions of Nepalese are depend on their livelihoods, socio-cultural systems like rituals and rites. This dependency, immensely, stresses the importance of sustainable use and conservation of natural resources for benefit of both people, nature, and development of the nation as well. We have like, policies and mechanisms and institutions for the management of natural resources. However, the favorable implementations and monitoring to restrict over harvesting and exploitation of natural resources, illegal activities like poaching, hunting, illegal logging, and timber trafficking fueled by, systematic corruptions, unfavorable, political conditions for conservations, lack of coordinations between the governing bodies and actual need of the local people, and simply, poor governance have imposed hindrances, in conservation and management of natural resources in Nepal. Additionally, a plethora of instances related to the violation of land rights, human rights, and livelihood of indigenous peoples who are fundamentally dependent on natural resources, so a greater need for their protection and representation in governance and decision-making processes. But that's not actually happening. And so how these our institutions, how these existing institutions can address this kind of problem. I think that's one of the critical area to be focused on. And we also have this ongoing this climate crisis in the country, and we have Nepal has this high influx of migration over the years. According to the recently published 2021 census report of Nepal, states that like 0.7% of the total migrant populations have reported the reason for migration is natural disaster. Another 3.9% have indicated agricultural factors, as the reason for migration. And over the last like few decades, there have been, increases in instances of extreme weather and natural disasters that experts have attributed to climate change, including floods, landslides, glacial outbursts, droughts, and dry spells. The Asian Development Bank had suggested that Nepal faces the prospect of losing like 2.2% of its annual GDP due to climate change impacts by 2050. The Nepal government has, singled out the country, energy sectors, agriculture, water resources, forestry, biodiversity, and health sector as the most at risk in its official, communications. So, just to give an example, in the year 2022 itself, nearly 245 disaster events reported and 32,000 like new displacements are recorded. One of the ADB reports also projects that an average like 96,000 people can be displaced in any given year in future by earthquake and riverine floods. So climate change and low levels of human development have increased the risk of disaster displacement. Likewise, recently published like National Planning Commission report shows that approximately 2.24% of the total land where mountain regions accounted 1.64%, hill 1.9%, and Tarai 2.5% were made uncultivable due to flooding and soil erosion. This low agricultural productivity and food losses have forces people, especially agro-based people, to search for new source of, agricultural land, water, and food. And, as the data, and the previous study have clearly, indicates a strong linkage between climate change and migrations. And one of the studies conducted, our center, have also defined this as a proportional and heterogeneous relationship between these two. Means the larger the magnitude of environmental degradation, the larger the corresponding effect observed in the human mobility. So, how to, actually address this problem, because there is a high influx of migration, and the recent data says that over the past 18 years, the government data says that like 5.7 million people received a labor permit from the government for foreign employment. And even in the year 2022-2023, nearly 800,000 people obtained permit for foreign employment. So that means, a record high number of people are trying to leave the country for various reasons. And this data does not include the cross-border migration between India and Nepal, which is also quite high in number. So, and we can also, observe like, growing trend of an unplanned labor migration due to diverse impact of climate change and extreme weather events. Often such unplanned migration have been an uninformed labor migration, resulting into workers' exploitations as they are desperate to get into work in the new places. They have often lost their bargaining power to obtain, reasonable wages and other social security benefits. In most cases, their labor rights are compromised. Likewise, our other anecdotal evidences suggest that climate change and extreme weather events have contributed to increase the length of stay of labor migrants, in their workplace destinations. Burden to repay the loan, recovering the financial loss due to extreme weather events, and even to cover the cost of family expenses. I found some of the reasons behind longer stay in workplace destinations. So, why I'm presenting all this data, facts and figures, okay, is that, whether the institutions that we have formed, let's say, after the signing of peace agreement or writing the new constitutions, are able to address some of these pressing needs of the Nepalese society. Whether institutions are capable, or whether institution has have sufficient resources, or whether institutions have come up with a certain strategy to deal with this kind of problems. I think that's something very important to take into considerations. And whereas, like, when it comes to this green economy and eco-friendly development and the renewable energy, Nepal has made some considerable progress over the years in terms of its hydropower developments, finding out this, renewable energy, and also like promoting like sustainable tourisms and local enterprises, and even like, the forest conservations, like, so that's, so there has been a progress, there has been some progress, but still, the demand is high. So the problem is that the demand is quite high, whereas the institutions are not delivering, So as a result of that, the conflict between the people and the state is also in increasing trend. And in my presentation, like, later today, I'm going to talk about like that, like what kind of conflict trends that we have observed in terms of development arena or natural resource arena, political arena, something like that. So my presentation will focus on that later this afternoon. But in a concluding, as a concluding remark, I just want to mention is that our institutions has been able to, let's say, prevent this large scale violence, large scale political violence. But like, why other institutions are not able to, are not being successful to achieve their goals? Is it because we don't lack? Is it because we don't have, like, Nepal does not have a strong political will, or is it because it does not have enough resources, or is it because we're just ignoring the fact? I think it's very important time to to have discussions around these topics, and try to come up with some better solutions. And for this, I think what Nepal required is some proactive discourses around these topics. So thank you very much.
Great. We have some time for some questions, and I'll start it off. I thought it was really interesting that you brought up the police as kind of the first line of justice, almost in an informal way. And I was wondering if, in your opinion, do you feel that if people don't have trust, say, in the police, does that then erode their faith in the justice system overall, since that's who most people have access to, is the police?
Yeah, there are, I think, like a mixed community, I should say. No, so there are some. On the one hand, like, people do not trust with the institutions, but at the same time, like, there's no other way that they could go for justice. So that's one of the factors why they first approach to police to access justice. So that's one interpretation. Another interpretation is that I'm not saying that they are not doing like they're the police are totally corrupt or something like that, but there are also it's also very much like some of these police institutions are also very much personality driven. Like some police officers in a particular police post have performed really well when they were posting when they had posted there, and because of that image, like people you know tend to go, like tend to visit, frequently to access justice. So that's also that's also another interpretation. And the third one is like, um, I think police has a long history of like, serving community, even if it is not, let's say, a super reputed, let's say, institutions, because of their like nationwide presence, so they are quite easily approachable as compared to, let's say, if they have to, let's say, file a case in the court, so they have to travel all the way to district headquarters, whereas police is just, maybe, 20 kilometers away from, from their home. So that's also the reason. So I think these are the three interpretations that I can make.
Great. Are there questions?
Thank you for the presentation, Professor. And there's one thing that I'm curious about Truth Reconciliation Commission. You mentioned that was created in 2014. Although the CPA mentioned already the establishment TRC, but it did take 8 years to establish. And I think that quite problematic, and it did take so long time comparing to other disputing case. So why did it take so long time to establish TRC?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your question. And so what happened is that when the peace agreement was signed, so there were like a lot of issues to be implemented, the DDR, the integration of armies and the management of arms, writing new constitutions, providing, interim relief to conflict victims. So like, they were, restoring this security, agencies and everything. So there were like so many programs or so many, interventions were in place. What happened is that like the political parties, the rebel groups, the signatories of the conflicting parties, and including international community, put there a lot of efforts, like their beginning efforts to, let's say, to complete the DDR process, or to complete the constitution writing process, or to provide, interim relief to the victims. Whereas they gave kind of a little attention to the formation of truth and reconciliation commissions. So there were like some, interventions. There were some discussion going on that there needs to be TRC in place, blah, blah, blah. But, other interventions were quite dominated as compared to the TRC formation process. And the second one is like, generally, if you look at other, let's say, post, agreement or post-conflict society, where, they have adopted this, simultaneous intervention approach, that you do like, different things, one at a time. Whereas Nepal kind of tried to adopt this like sequential approach, like you finished one and then move to the next one, So that's the reason, also it got delayed. And the third one is like, the constitution making process was like on the top priority of everyone. like, the Maoist rebels, the political parties, the international communities, civil society, media, so everyone had emphasis on, like, writing the constitution first and then do other things, because the discourse was created in such a way that, like, if constitution is in place, then everything will be solved, So that was also kind of, a dominant discourse. So these are the three factors, like, why it got to that. And the pressure, like, because in a post-conflict environment, the voice of the victims was subjugated, and always, like, it's a victim group who had to, bring that issue into a national, discussion, that there needs to be the, the timely, formation of these commissions. But, like, that was not a kind of, a powerful voice, or it was not, like, adequately heard by the conflicting party, because they had also fear that, fear of being prosecuted. So everyone wants to, linger the process so that they might get rid of it, eventually. And it's happening the same, right? Even today, like, after 10 years of establishing the commissions, the complaints are still there.
Dr. Prakash, thank you very much for a very interesting and comprehensive presentation. And my name is Bejan. I'm from Hiroshima University, and I am from Tajikistan. So now what you're saying, like, it's more close and familiar and easy for me to get, because in Tajikistan we also had a civil war in during 1990s, and we went through whole this peace process. And I understand that it's a really long process, and, like, it took 5 years to like this whole process, and after we had a lot of tens of negotiations and 8 rounds of high official high level negotiations, and at last, like, we had peace agreement and struggled a lot to create these government institutions. So my question is, like, during this peace process, which countries or international organizations acted as a mediator in Nepal? And my second question is, like, example of which country maybe was taken like during adoption of constitution and these government institutions. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. So actually, my whole PhD research was focused on third-party intervention in civil conflict and peace processes, and I did a comparative study between Nepal and the Philippines. So that was my PhD. And interestingly, in the case of Nepal, there was no such formal third-party involvement to facilitate the peace process. So we called it as a homegrown, process. But there was, like, I mean, the evidences suggest that, so it was India who also informally facilitated, the negotiation between the rebels and the seven-party alliance, like the one who actually negotiated, agreement with the rebel group. And also, in the post-agreement period, so a UN mission was established there, like to support the political process and the management of arms and armies. And, like, many other, like, European countries were involved, like Norway was involved, Denmark was involved, European Union was involved, United States, United Kingdom. So many countries were involved in that process. And and all these countries were also like kind of supporting the constitution making process as well. But the total process was, owned by or like Nepali actors. So that's one of the beauty of the Nepal peace process, that the Nepali actors were in the driving seat, and they only took support, like a technical and financial support from the international community. So that was kind of the situation.
And thank you very much for a great presentation and an active discussion. We have 2 certificates of appreciation for you. One is from the executive vice president for global initiatives and the director for the Network for Education and Research on Peace and Sustainability, from Dr. Kaneko-san, Sensei. And then the second one is from the director of the IDEC Institute, Masori Ishihashi. Thank you very much. And thank you all for attending today. This concludes our 31st webinar. So thank you very much.